Hey, Cut the Shit listeners. You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Go check us out. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Link, COO here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, I'm very excited to have Allison Layman as our guest. Allison is a senior account manager at IDR, a full-service recruiting and staffing firm that focuses on helping clients in three business sectors: technology, healthcare, and government. The company was founded in Atlanta and now has 500 employees providing recruiting in the Atlanta, Nashville, Denver, and Dallas markets. Allison has been with IDR for 9 years, and during her tenure, she's been part of the IDR growth trajectory from 10 to 500 employees, so rapid, and the massive economic and recruiting upheaval that was COVID. During our conversation, Allison shares her perspective on the current, less crazy state of the market, some do's and don'ts for both clients and candidates, and why better internal communication and a little planning might just be the key to better success at finding and keeping great talent. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Allison Layman. Allison, welcome to Cut the Shit. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Happy Monday, Bryan.
Absolutely. Before we dive into the meat of the discussion, how about we start with you? Give us an example of an interesting use of technology or a hack that you've seen recently, whether that could be at home or at work or something you heard about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with something work related because it's definitely impacted my role and our recruiter's role. So we partnered with an AI company that provides a bot that's integrated with our current CRM that anytime we post a job, it goes in our system and auto matches candidates to that job description, but then also we'll do the initial screening. So when I say initial screening, it'll actually contact the candidate and go through, what are your main motivators, the pay you're looking for, does your skill set have X, Y, Z? And so it cuts down on some of that admin type screening work where when the recruiter picks up the phone, they're actually spending time getting to know the person, coaching them on what they can do to better present themselves to the client and so on. So we're able to fill positions a hell of a lot quicker than we were before because, instead of screening 1,000 candidates a week, we're screening hundreds and thousands a week due to this bot we have that's integrated in our system. So it's been so helpful. I'm so appreciative of it. But I know my recruiters are too because they're more intentional with their time now.
Excellent. And how long has the bot been in operation and how's the training going with it?
Oh gosh, so the training's ongoing, right? Because it's not only integrated with our system now, but our other job boards we leverage. So that's going to be ongoing for sure, but we've had it live for about 3 months now. And we've seen an uptick in our hire ratios. Week 1 of launching it, we saw an uptick in that. So plan on keeping it. Gotcha.
Very good. Very good. Well, that's cool. It's interesting. I think the promise of AI obviously is sort of unlimited. I think for most of us, I would say we're only limited by our imagination, but we might be actually limited by our imagination when it comes to it. But it's also sort of I think a lot of us have struggled to sort of figure out, where do you start? What are the best initial use cases for diving in and applying it in a way that really works well for your company. So it's interesting to hear you guys, have found a good solid use case. Congratulations. And that's, I think everybody's looking for that.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important to note, which is probably a good segue into why you brought me on here, but you can't just invest in technology. You need to invest in your people too. And if you're not kind of having that ongoing training on how to use the tech that you're paying a pretty penny for, it ends up useless and detrimental to your company. So
sure. Yeah. It's just an overhead at that point. It's not worth it. So.
Right.
no matter the promise, right? Yeah, so, all right, well, let's get to the main event. Why don't you give us a little bit of background? Tell us, again, we've already introduced your name and job title, but tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to the role that you're in currently at IDR.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is sales. I'll tell you the day I turned 15, my mom said, "Okay, go in there and grab an application." It was at Sonic. So if you're in fast food, I have a deep bound appreciation for what you do because not many of us can do it successfully. But I think that Sonic, and then, where was I after that? Cinnabon, all the jobs I've had leading up to IDR was dealing with people. And I quickly realized that in college, and I was kind of determining what's my future career like. I needed to stay in that space. And it's not just dealing with people, but helping people. I started out in psychology thinking I was going to be a psychiatrist one day, and then realized, okay, maybe I don't have the smarts to go into med school. So pivoted into business, and IDR actually found me. And at the time, I had no idea what staffing was. But looking at their Instagram and talking to a few people in the industry, they just seemed fun. They seemed like a fun group that did something in the service industry, which was providing talent to their clients. And it's been my career home ever since. I'm coming up on 9 years, which is dog years in staffing. So some might say I'm nearing retirement, which is not true by any means. But when I first started, I was recruiting. IDR, we grow organically. So anyone that's ever joined started out as a recruiter, and I did that for about 2.5 years, and then naturally moved on to the sales side. So instead of talking to candidates every day, all day, finding out, what that next career move is. Now I'm more so on the client side, helping customers kind of forecast of, what are the skills gap? What are the current talent that you have? How can we, create some synergy? And then, dictating to those recruiters underneath me, hey, this is this is our problem that we got to solve, and let's find the right talent and make some magic happen.
Gotcha. Well, that's it's kind of a good segue to I wanted to kind of dig in on IDR a little bit and its history, but before we do that, you mentioned you didn't know what staffing or recruiting was, and I think the reality, and I know a little bit about it because my daughter worked in the space for a while, but I've never worked in it myself, so that's still 2 steps removed. Help our listeners understand tell us about the business. What is it? How does it work? And what's it involved? What's involved in sort of the recruiting and staffing business? Because again, I don't think most people really know how it actually works.
I get asked this every time I say I'm in staffing. Everyone's like, "Can you explain that? I know you find people jobs, so what really goes on?" And it's a long conversation. There's a lot to unpack. So let me see if I can use our time wisely. So at the core, we are helping customers, so clients like yourselves, find the right talent. Now let's peel back the layers. There's a process of me figuring out, okay, what is the company culture? What are their budget constraints? What are their short-term and long-term goals? And that's me really vetting out the use, saying, okay, what's really happening here? What have you tried? What have you not tried as far as, talent retention and even attraction, that sort of thing. And then going back to my recruiting team and saying, hey, here's what we've got here. And then all the in-between layers are HR, onboarding, um, talking to candidates, making sure that they're qualified, but also interested, which if I could underline that 1,000 times, I would. But there's a lot to it. So it's not just, oh, here's a job order, go use your bot to find someone that's qualified. There's a lot of in-between efforts that happen that are ongoing, because I'll tell you, your problem today is not going to be your problem tomorrow. So the conversations are ongoing. And what I just mentioned, it's on the agency side and recruiting. It's not just for one or two clients. We're servicing hundreds of customers. So as you can imagine, just depending on company size and what they're really doing at the time, that the every day looks different, if I can answer that properly. Does that give you a better picture?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we've had people, my daughter would say, like they don't understand even that, like the clients are the ones who pay, not the folks that get recruited, not the candidates. Like a lot of people don't even understand those fundamentals unless you've been involved in working with a recruiter. Then you obviously understand how it works, right? Because you see what the contract is. I just meant like it's interesting how fairly ubiquitous the service is, how little understanding there is of sort of the mechanics of it, which is kind of interesting. But at the same time, I mean, we're in the IT services business, and you say that, and that really doesn't tell anybody anything about what it is that you might actually do. So, there's like most things, unless you get in the middle of it, it's sort of hard to really suss it out. But thanks for sharing that sort of overview of the kind of the way the business works. Let's kind of take a step down into the details a little bit and talk to us a little bit about IDR. Give us a background on the firm and sort of what particular role or niche you guys play in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around since '98. So even before I joined, and in '98 we were tiny. And even when I joined in the office, there was maybe 10 people. So it felt like a true startup, which I know Plow can probably attest to this. Fast forward to now, sometimes I have to check my cheat sheet of what's their role again? What's their name? So it definitely feels, I don't want to say more corporate, but more like a company where it's not just my friends that I'm sitting next to. It's a real corporation. We're just shy of about 500 folks. The growth is astronomical. We service 3 different industries, so government sector, technology, which is where I fall under primarily, and then we also have a healthcare division. So in the IT sector, which I think, let's stay there since just for the sake of your listeners out there, but we're a full service staffing firm. So what that really means is if you need a contract placement for, a short-term gig, maybe a highly skilled worker, people call on us. If you have a full-time need, we service direct hire as well as contract to hire business, which typically you'll slate something as like a temp to perm position over direct hire, maybe to get them onboarded quicker, or as I like to say, try before you buy type mentality. Yep. But it's all corporate positions. I tell people the easy answer is I pretty much service all corporate technical roles, just nothing blue collar, if you will.
Got it. And the nature of the client base, is it all over the board in terms of sizes? I mean, you gave us industry focus, but does that scale from, a 3-person firm to 3,000 people, or do you have a particular size or type of operation that you work with?
Yeah. So if it was up to our board, we would service, the sharks, all of the giant enterprise customers. The truth is we service small mom and pop shops to those enterprise customers. I have a preference on more of the SMBs domain, just because it's a more intimate relationship. You get to know the people quicker and grow with them, whereas enterprise, it's maybe a month before you get on a C-suite's calendar, right? But the short answer is all across the board.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's transition a little and talk about just kind of what you're seeing out in the marketplace. Again, the kinds of things, the kinds of stuff you're living every day in talking to both clients and candidates. Give us kind of a general overview. And again, we'll stay focused on technology for obvious reasons. I mean, I'd love to hear what's going on in the government recruiting market, but not on this podcast, and probably over a beer, to be honest. So that's a different conversation altogether. You give us a general overview of sort of what you're seeing in the tech talent market, right? And then where do we stand between the match between supply and demand? So are there more people chasing jobs or more jobs chasing people, or does that story vary? So that's kind of a broad-based question. Go from there.
Yeah, so let me start out by giving my personal opinion on this. Coming off of COVID last year, the job market looked vastly different than it ever has. You know, companies, the Amazons, the Deloittes of the world were paying double what they did years previously. And candidates were switching jobs like crazy. If you're in my industry, it was really fun. Everything was happening really fast and people were paying lots of money. And now, I think because of that, I feel like people almost got comfortable with that being the new norm. And now that things are starting to stabilize, I'm hearing a lot of anxiety type of conversations where people are, we're entering in a recession. What are we going to do? There's no jobs or there's no talent out there, and people are just kind of stuck in this mindset of, oh no, things are scary. And my personal opinion is I think that people just got comfortable with last year and need to realize that in the tech space, I need to find this article and I'll send it to you, but 81% of CIOs within the US said they still plan to add additional headcount for 2024. So if you're in the headspace of, oh no, are we going to need to make cuts, or is my job secure? Pause for a minute and realize what happened last year and look at the forward plan and talk to your leadership and, be a little bit more grounded. But what's happening in tech, I'll say this, the traditional skill sets of maybe an agile PM or just a .NET developer that has no niche, I see those being less in demand now. And the skill sets that are probably on every job board out there are around cybersecurity, data. It goes hand in hand, right? Anything under AI, automation, innovation, even, those are hot skill sets. And I think that if you have a skill set that you are, I guess, worried that automation, AI, or whatever can take over, then that's when you need to be talking to your leadership to say, hey, what's our forward plan? Where can I add the most value? Because I think where all this kind of worrywart syndrome comes from is lack of communication. And I think that's why I stay employed, because I'm a liaison between the talent and the clients. But, I wouldn't be needed as much if there was more communication within companies internally about where we're headed. But demand wise, in a short answer, sorry, I go on tangents and you need to start pointing at me because I'm known for that. But it's cloud, it's cybersecurity, it's AI, it's anything data related.
Lines up with the growth areas, right? I mean, and so skills gaps in general, right? Because we're talking about new areas, right? There's only, true cybersecurity expertise, right? No one has more than 10 years of cybersecurity expertise, right? In the sense of what we're talking about, probably even less, right? It's a brand new area, particularly, AI is brand new, right? And the idea of the applications of what we're talking about, even data analytics, because so much has changed, is new. So, right. So you've got this sort of growth of demand for the need for these things without the commensurate sort of lag time that it takes for people to train and learn how to do this stuff at the levels that people probably want. So it makes a lot of sense. It lines up with the conversations we have with clients and the stuff that they talk about that they are struggling with, right? Whether those are services or people, because those go hand in hand.
I will say this too. I read this morning where, 80 something % of clients are trying to incorporate cloud systems and move towards this, innovative space. But there's only about 7% of people in their company that can fill those gaps. So that kind of goes back into what I said at the beginning. You can't just invest in tech. You got to invest in your people. And if you upskill them, and provide the professional development, then that kind of solves that gap, right?
That's right. That's right. Within the context of that discussion, or maybe sort of embedded in that demand side, and we'll use demand side here to mean the client side. Are you seeing, and maybe this is as the same as it always was, or maybe it's changed, but are you seeing more demand for permanent positions versus contract versus on-demand short-term roles? Are you seeing any difference in the mix of needs?
All across the board, to be honest. However, it's very telling when I get a call for 10 to 15 contingent labor needs, and they need the person yesterday, which you've probably said at some point in your life, I need this person yesterday, and it's because they didn't forecast, they didn't have those conversations proactively. So I'm very thankful for those calls, because again, it keeps me employed. But I would say the positions for full-time contract are all across the board. I think as in Q4, as we near Turkey Day, companies are going to be a lot more sensitive of their budgets, which this happens every year. And sometimes when I tell people, they act surprised. I'm like, this is a reoccurring theme, even
Right.
from before I was alive. So
yes, it's not new. Yeah.
Right. Kids are out for school, it's Christmas, it's the holidays, and then, budget, the fiscal year, you've got to be mindful of that too. So between now and the end of 2023, I think there will be an uptick in contingent labor. But then, Q1, just like every year, we'll see a lot of those full-time positions be released publicly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously you mentioned, COVID and sort of the boom we saw in job changing and salary, compensation increases kind of along those lines. What are you seeing in terms of specific demands, both from clients, in terms of what they want to pay, and from talent in terms of what they'd like to get paid? Are you seeing a mismatch there as a hangover from that, or is that begun as the market sort of settled that a little bit, and are you seeing those numbers stabilize compared to what we saw in the past couple of years?
A lot to unpack here too. So going back to coming off of COVID, I do think that the candidate pool, I hate to say this, but a lot of people became a lot more spoiled, I guess is the best way to put it. Even college grads, it was not uncommon for a tier 1 help desk, someone, candidates talking to us saying they wanted 75K coming right out of the gate. And, I did that too. I'm like, okay, who have they been talking to?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that there's still candidates out there that are very unrealistic on their expectations. However, if you look at SIA stats, which is a good platform to just get this type of news on, I think it was 49%. I'll fact check me after this, but of employers plan to provide salary increases as well as other perks, whether it be their benefits or work from home flexibility. So I do think that naturally corporations have to be doing that just because of inflation. I mean, avocados are like $5 right now, right? Like living is not cheap. Eating whole food's not cheap. So as inflation happens, corporations kind of have to be realistic with, they have to keep up with the trends, but candidates too, they need to humble themselves and realize, if you're coming out of school, you're not going to be making 6 figures. If you are, tell me what job you're going after, so I can learn from you. But
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's starting to stabilize in terms of we're not going to see the COVID rates anymore. And smart corporations are planning for 2024, realizing that inflation's happening and they need to keep up with it.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's I mean, you've done, I don't know how many job placements and searches you've been involved with, but I'm guessing it's a lot. And so you've talked to a lot of clients and a lot of candidates. So let's do a little bit of kind of advice by Allison, if you don't mind. So if you were going to talk to a client and they were looking for advice on how to hire, besides hiring you, so we'll put that to the side. What advice would you give to a client that was looking to hire tech talent? I mean, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you'd lay out for them, to make sure they, at least try to help them stay on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's a brand new client that I know nothing about, some of the first, I guess, preemptive questions I would ask them, well, what have you tried so far? Who have you involved in the hiring process? It's mind-boggling when most responses I get are, well, I tell HR that I need a network engineer 5 years plus, and I give them salary constraints, and maybe you should talk to them. And the lack of communication is the number one issue. In my world and in internal TA functions, it used to be, here's a job description, go post it, and let's pray and hope the right person applies, right? That is certainly not the case anymore. If you're not aligning with, your HR business partners, your TA partners to really define what's needed, get your thoughts on paper, and then rally together to voice to the world, hey, this is what we need, this is what we're doing, and really help sell that opportunity. You're doomed to fail. And one bad job description out there for a month on LinkedIn can ruin your entire reputation. I don't know if this is still true or not, but I learned quickly in middle school, 80% of your business is word of mouth. I still think that's so true. So it matters what you say, it matters what you put out there for employers or future employees to see. And if you're a leader or hiring manager and you're not involved in that process, I would challenge you to to start becoming part of the process. And maybe you won't be one of the ones saying you're struggling to find talent.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, on the candidate side, you mentioned a little bit about word of mouth or, that the sort of reputational aspects, but what are some do's and don'ts for candidates when they're either actively looking for a job or thinking about looking for a job? And maybe as a corollary, interacting with recruiters, because that's a common thing you deal with as a candidate. And there may be some advice there you could share as well.
Yeah. Well, let me mention this. It is 100% free to talk to staffing firms and leverage them for either resume advice, career advice, what's happening in the market. So I feel like kind of what you're saying, a lot of people think that to leverage a firm like IDR, you need to pay a fee up front, right? That's not the case. So if you're a candidate and you're looking for a job, don't be afraid to have those types of conversations early on, even if you're not looking to make a move right away. We're here for a reason, right? And I guess taking a step further, say you're looking to make a job pretty immediately, get your resume up to date. Ask more than one person for advice on, what really should go in there. More times than not, I end up giving some coaching advice of, hey, that's great that you put SQL and Python down, but how did you use those skills, and how did that affect the bottom line? What impact did you have in the company? Get all of your accomplishments. You think of it like a brag book on paper for your employer to see, right? You're competing with not just your market. You're competing with all 50 states now, sometimes even offshore resources, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
your resume, your LinkedIn should brand who you are. And that's the one time where I'm like, be selfish and write down anything that makes you look good, right? Leverage your staffing firm, leverage your, anybody in the market to help you kind of put your value add out there. And don't just think that you can quick apply and you'll get a call back. I think that I use this term maybe too often, but it falls into the black hole of HR, not because HR stinks or TA departments stink, but there might be 1,000 applicants per one job opening, right? So you can't assume that your stuff is ever going to be looked at by a quick apply. So I encourage people to take it a step further and reach out directly even after you apply to a job. Figure out, I mean, LinkedIn's beautiful to use. It's free to use, right? You can see who you have mutual connections with. Who is a third connection that could maybe make an introduction. So leverage these free, awesome platforms that we have now to get in front of the right people. And that's not just in front of the TA people, right? It's if you're applying for, a VP of IT that probably reports to the SV of IP or the CIO, right? Like, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for a conversation.
And you mentioned LinkedIn a couple of times, and it feels like that's been a game changer in the recruiting space. And I was just curious to get, since you've been doing it for a while, so maybe your whole entire career hasn't been based around LinkedIn, but I know for a number of recruiters that is the case. And so just interesting for you to comment on how much that's changed the game for recruiting as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that corporations used to, use Indeed or, Hire Easy, I think it's called, because, those are cheaper and those were the go-to. In today's climate, you're not going to find the right talent by leveraging, the one-off job boards. LinkedIn is a great platform where you can see who's connected to who, what recommendations do they have. Spot check what kind of domains have they worked in and so on. So I do love it. It's the Facebook of the professional world in my mind.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. A couple of other things that I just was curious if you're seeing that clients have been doing for a while or have maybe started or stopped doing. And that's things like, behavioral or psychological testing as part of the hiring process, or sort of the use of homework assignments or having people do stuff to try to gauge capabilities prior to hiring. And I know there's a try before you buy with contract, but there's also, that isn't always something that people are looking for. So just curious about other techniques besides the sort of skills and experience and then fit questions that we would think of that are part of a normal hiring, maybe not normal, but a typical hiring process.
Let me see if I can answer this and what you're trying to get across. So companies are doing that more and more. I'm a huge fan of attitude over aptitude first. And people are going to put their best foot forward on an interview, right? They're going to be coached and they're going to say all the right things. I love when I partner with employers who are like, okay, we want to know who this person is when they're not on the screen, right? So you'll have employers ask, what type of, say humans didn't exist, it was all animals, what animal would you be and why? There's not a right answer, but you really get to see kind of their critical thinking, what they come up with. Another is, take them to lunch, but have them come to the office and make them drive. Right. Put them on the spot a little bit, and then maybe call the restaurant prior and tell them to intentionally mess up the order and their order, obviously, and to see how they deal with under pressure and when there's a problem in front of them, how do they handle it? So people are probably going to take these, but get creative, right? Don't stick to the, hey, here's a VPN. How do you fix the connection of blah, blah, blah? Those are important too. They serve its place. But I think that it's important to realize that we spend more time with our work spouses than we do our real spouses at time. And we have to really know them, trust them, and get in their head a little bit. And a 30-minute interview going over tech questions only does so much.
Yeah, it's true. Okay. So this is kind of a question. This is just based purely off your experience, but, where do you see the most success and this is more about the process. Where do you see the most success in terms of a good match between client and candidate? So this would be something you'd be able to look back on, previous hires. And in those, when you think about those really successful hires that you've been a part of, and you look backward on those, and you think about that process, what do you attribute that success to? Is, I mean, obviously some of it is luck, because you never know. This is a probabilistic game, but like, what is it that you see? Maybe clients that have done multiple hires that have had a lot of, as a percent on a percentage basis, have had a lot more success than maybe some others. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah. I think the number one common denominator of the success stories is when the hiring manager and client I'm working with takes the interviewing process seriously and puts time, commitment around bringing in the right person. I think that there's such a mismatch with candidates and opportunities out there right now. Just there's no clear boundaries of, okay, I'm going to set aside time and give this candidate an interview within 48 hours of applying. So timing is a big thing. Being committed to bringing in the right talent and dedicating time to finding the right talent. But once you start the interview process, I think it's really important not to just meet with the person that's going to be signing off on your next raise. It's important to grab a team lead, grab a few members of the team and expose the candidate to who they're actually going to be working with. This happens quite a bit. I know you didn't ask this, but what doesn't work is, you've got a VP of, IT, and he says, I want to do the interview, and he hires somebody, maybe a middle management person, who's only met with him. Well, realistically, he's probably only going to engage with that VP once a quarter, right? So it is just, I can't stress that enough. It's so important to involve the people that are actually going to be working that person day in and day out. When you're actually having those interviews, I also find it really valuable, from the candidate feedback we get, is when you're just genuine and real and you talk about the good, bad, and ugly. No company's perfect. We all have problems and opportunities. Let's replace problems with opportunities that we're working towards. But I see a lot of, hey, this is what we're doing. We're awesome. And when you ask them, well, what's your attrition rate? What's the common denominators of why people have left? What's your net promoter score? And the candidate asking the client this, or the potential employer this, they sugarcoat a lot of it. And this is why I love the name of this podcast. The no BS approach will get you really far in life. But as an employer, you got to be upfront about those trials and tribulations, or you'll find out real quick that there's a lack of trust once that person gets hired on, and it's a domino effect of failure, right? And as a candidate, you got to be upfront about your shortcomings too. If you've never worked with, Terraform, and you're a DevOps engineer aspiring to learn Terraform, don't watch a couple of YouTube videos and oversell your skill set. Be honest. If they have any type of, value in professional development, and you're upfront of what you've learned on your own but never worked with it professionally, they're not going to not hire you because of that, right?
Right.
So going on tangent
Or
again,
if they don't hire you, it's because they needed somebody to come in and really do it. And if you do get the job, you're going to fail, right? It's going to be bad. You're going to get exposed. So
it's the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. But hey, honesty and integrity, golden rules, man. Just live by it. Be genuine.
All right, I got a couple more to wrap up before we let you go. Let's zoom back up a little and talk kind of at the company level, and then sort of broader the industry. But from your perspective, what does the future look like for IDR? You've mentioned a lot of growth and some changes here in a couple of different sectors. What's the future look like for the company? You've been there a while, so I figure you're in a good seat to comment.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of growth. And I don't just no BS. I mean that we are in several locations now, but I know at the board level, there's continuous conversations about servicing new industries and adding not just our bot that I mentioned at the beginning, but integrating with a lot of technology to allow recruiters, sales, operations to do their job more efficiently. I think effectively, efficiently, this is the hot topic of anybody's company, right? So
Sure.
I'm excited. We have implemented so many different sales development programs where it's going to allow us, instead of 2 reps per office, it's going to be 15, 30. So I'm excited about the clientele that we're going to be able to bring in with the added headcount.
Excellent. Excellent. So as you look ahead, what you think 2-3 years, not two, let's not get too far afield. Next 2-3 years, what excites you most about that when you think forward into that time frame?
Well, my own, I guess, issues. I'm so ADHD that, I've got purple squirrel syndrome like no other. And what keeps me going is more problems to solve, more customers to help. So selfishly for me, I'm excited about bringing in more clientele that I can help. If I have 5 recruiters now, but 30 recruiters by this time next year to support me, that means I can just say yes to a lot more, right? Right now, my biggest problem is having to turn down business just for the lack of resources. If I say yes, I want to make sure I can come through, right? And as we continue to grow, that means for me, I get to say yes a lot more.
I gotcha. Okay. And so on the flip side, what scares you as you think over that same time frame?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot. I think as we add new people and we grow really fast, it's gonna be a struggle at times to get everyone up to speed to support our clientele, right? So I think I'm nervous about being able to be a sounding board internally and help train the people that support my lanes, but also a balancing act with doing my day-to-day work externally to support my customers. I think as you grow teams, professional development and then running your operations, it's separate, right? And
Sure.
finding the balance to make both run smoothly can be a struggle at times.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, with that, I'll kind of wrap up the businessy questions and close out with a little more personal question. And I've asked people this almost on every podcast, and it's really helpful. I hope it's helpful for the listeners. If not, it's always helpful for me because I find new stuff to go check out. But can you share something with the audience that you've read or watched lately that you think they ought to check out?
Just on staying on the same topic of business, honestly, SIA is a free platform website where you can sign up for weekly kind of just newsletters of what's really happening in the market. And I didn't used to keep a pulse on that kind of stuff. And in the last 3 years, I realized, shoot, if I'm not doing that, how I'm being a disservice to my clients. And so it's a quick read, find what's pertinent to you. If it's not relevant, then maybe choose a different newsletter to be a part of. But I think that signing up for something that's relevant and kind of ongoing real-time data like SIA, which is just staffing stats, right? For me, I love. It's where I got most of the percentage I was throwing out today.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes to that so people, if they want to go take a look, see, they can. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, Allison, we'll let you get back to work. Thank you so much for being on Cut the Shit. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I loved it. I appreciate you, Bryan. Thank you so much.
And thanks for the help you've given us over the last 2-3 years. I think it's been about that long, maybe a little longer. In finding some strong candidates. We appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to the continued partnership.
Sounds good. Well, thanks a lot. Have a great day.
You too.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, and hell, anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on TikTok at CutTheShitPod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel at Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.